Hi, I'm Matt with Mode Realty Network, and I'm here with Joe Long from Guild Mortgage. And today's topic, we're going to talk about VA financing. And sometimes there could be a little bit of difference between VA and traditional loans, and Joe's going to help unpack some of that for us today. So, first off, what are some of the advantages of going with a VA loan? And I guess rolling that back, first off, who can get VA loans? And then tell us some of the advantages.
The VA loan is first of all, thanks for having me here. The VA loan is an awesome loan, and these are for service people who have served our country, and they have earned this benefit as part of their service. Mm-hmm. So there are different, so if you were in the Army, Navy, Marines, and you just have a normal discharge, you are immediately eligible for a VA loan in most cases. Okay. Then there are people who have been in the Guard. They have to be in for a certain amount of time, and a lot of people don't know this, but Coast Guard members have to be in for a certain amount of time, and that's a little bit of a different process, but it's around 6 years that you need to be in the Guard to qualify for a VA loan. It's a super cool loan. It is a zero down loan. It has no mortgage insurance. If the vet does not have a service-related disability, there's a small funding fee that gets rolled into the loan, but it's still very affordable, and it doesn't make a massive difference. So dollar for dollar, the loan is cheaper than most conventional or other government loans because of that lack of PMI.
Right. So for those who don't know what PMI is, it's essentially if you don't have like 20% down or so on your loan, you have to pay a certain amount to help offset the risk for the lender the loan provider, correct?
Well said.
Yeah. So in VA, because it's backed by the government, they don't necessarily have to have that. It's just that benefit, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, so that funding fee covers some of it, right? So the cost of, so if they don't have the service-related disability, that small funding fee goes to offset losses and to help run the program.
Right. Okay. So for those of you unfamiliar, what he's talking about with the funding fee is literally when you go and you get the loan, there's a little bit of an extra cost up front.
Correct.
But then it allows you the opportunity to essentially 100% financing, right?
100% financing. You can use it on a 1 through 4 unit property, which is really, really cool. And if you think about it, a lot of vets may be, coming back from a deployment, or they may enter really young, and they might still have debts from starting off their life. And so the ability to buy a multi-unit, get some rent to offset the cost of living, or even just to buy a place without a down payment is a huge opportunity for these people. And so, it kind of fits the lifestyle and the life path of a lot of veterans, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. And then compared to a conventional loan, how are interest rates of a VA versus like a 30-year fixed?
Pretty typical, or pretty similar. So normally a VA loan is going to be kind of right on par with what a conventional interest rate is. So if conventional interest rates for people with large down payments and very good credit are going to be about what you're looking at on a VA loan. Sometimes slightly better, but when you look at the fact that one of these people is putting down a huge down payment and one of them is putting down no down payment, that difference is almost negligible.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So then with the VA, there are a couple of other hoops you have to jump through, right? So I know that you have to sign a little.
The escape clause.
Well, there's the escape clause, but certainly it's an important part of getting a VA loan as part of your offer to purchase, where you have to sign essentially the amendatory clause.
Correct.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Basically, there's a document that says that the veteran cannot be forced to pay more than the appraised value of the property. And the appraisal on a VA loan is done by a VA rostered appraiser. It's the only loan where we actually order the appraisal through a VA portal, and the VA assigns the appraiser. So whatever they determine the value to be at, sans any arguments or reconciliations, the veteran cannot be forced to pay. Now, a common misconception is that if a seller signs that document, that it removes their ability to renegotiate. It does not, and oftentimes veterans will still renegotiate in those contracts, but the document ultimately ensures that the veteran can be let out of their contract if they're in a situation where they have to pay above.
Right, and so that's sort of an interesting segue then when we've talked a lot about the advantages of VA loans, but it's sort of, there's also that flip side. There's a couple of disadvantages, and maybe talking a little more about the VA appraisal and some of the requirements that go into actually securing the VA loan at the end and allowing somebody to close on the property might be a good topic of discussion.
Yeah, so probably it's two things that really make it different writing an offer on a house with a VA loan than on, say, a conventional loan, right? The first is there's a couple of more inspections that need to be done. Okay, so the VA requires in most areas, not in all areas, but in most areas, a wood destroying insect inspection. Okay, so most people think termites, but there's also powder post beetles and other things like that. So I've heard a lot of times people say, oh, there's not termites in Wisconsin, and actually it turns out there are. So this is one contingency that might be in a VA offer to purchase that's not in a normal offer to purchase. Can be paid for by any party in the transaction, which is nice. There's a misconception that the seller has to pay for that. That is no longer true. The veteran is allowed to pay for that, or we can collect for it on their settlement statement. So that's one thing. The other one is a conventional mortgage doesn't require you to have a well and a septic inspection if the home has a well and a septic. It is a requirement on a VA loan. So if the house is rural in nature and it has a well and a septic, that needs to be done.
Okay. How has the process been? Has it been fairly smooth, do you think, in terms of at the end of the day, it is a program designed to help veterans. So I assume that people are really just looking out for the best interest of veterans. They're not trying to make things difficult. Have you found that getting VA loans through the process has been relatively smooth? Has it been easy for you to do as someone who does a lot of VA financing?
Yeah, I think way easier than most people would think.
So I guess the thing is, don't be scared of a VA loan necessarily, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so this is a lot of stigma. And I've been in the business almost 17 years now, and they've always been fairly easy. I think property condition is probably the biggest thing that ends up coming up. But I think that the VA loan carries a stigma that because of, maybe one agent had a bad experience with wood destroying insects, and then another had a bad experience with maybe a lender who didn't do proper underwriting, and then kind of stories build, and then they create a stigma, right? But the truth is if the veteran has been well pre-qualified, right? So they've worked with a lender that does VA loans and knows what they're doing, and they're buying a house that doesn't have a ton of issues, most of the time there's not going to be an issue. So I don't think that stigma is fairly earned.
Right, and just as another person in the industry, I would say that a lot also falls on the providers in terms of, do you have a local lender? Do you have somebody who's really in the trenches looking out for your best interest, or do you have somebody thousands of miles away who you're just another name on their sheet? We're big fans of getting local financing, and that is the same with VA loans as well, because at the end of the day, it really is about the people, not so much about whether it's a large program or not. You want to make sure you're working with a mortgage provider who is looking out for your best interest. So another question about VA financing and some of the obstacles. Are there any other types of reservations that people might have, or is it really just limited to whatever habitability issues you might have during that appraisal process? So
I actually think it's interesting, aside from potential appraisal concerns, which we should go over, but no, VA loans are actually more forgiving on credit. They allow higher debt ratios. They allow lower credit scores. They allow the lowest amount of time out of a bankruptcy or a foreclosure of any of the loan programs that are on the market. So it's actually, as far as a qualifying and is this loan going to go through standpoint, the easiest one to qualify for.
Oh, interesting.
So it's really interesting. So again, going back to that stigma that doesn't seem to be fairly earned, right? I think, to your point, you were talking about local lenders. This is a noisy space, right? if you think in your head kind of who owns that VA loan marketing space, you will think of several large lenders, a couple of them based out of Florida and Texas, right? That are,
but we're not naming any.
We're not naming any names, that kind of own that space and market to veterans. And a lot of veterans, by default, they will go to those places. And some of them will have awesome experiences, and then some of them will get a pre-approval letter that has been generated by a website, and a human hasn't reviewed things. And often we'll find that with those lenders and other online lenders, if the diligence wasn't done up front, then somebody who never met the guidelines will get a pre-approval letter. And so that's not so much on the vet as it is on the industry and on the lender doing their job and their due diligence in the first place to make sure that that person qualifies.
Right. It comes down to the people, doesn't it? So what else do you, I guess if you had one final thing that you wanted to leave people with about VA loans, a good walk away for everyone, what would it be? What would you say people should know about VA loans that they wouldn't necessarily know?
Can I give you two instead of one?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that if you're a seller or a listing agent and you have a VA offer, you should maybe consider the fact that this is somebody who has served their country. This is somebody who has earned this benefit. They may not be using this loan because they have no money to put down or because they have any kind of credit issue. They may just be using it because it's a great option for them, and you should discuss with their lender and with the other co-broke if there's a way to make that transaction work for that VA buyer, because and not make decisions based on a stigma, right? Then if you're a buyer, I think what's really important for vets is to start a little bit earlier than on any other transaction, because there's a process where we have to order a certificate of eligibility. And sometimes that's automated, but if the person was discharged from the military a long time ago or they're in the Guard, we can't get an automated certificate of eligibility, and you don't want to go and write an offer on a house that you've fallen in love with without that in hand, because if you're banking on using VA and we can't get the certificate of eligibility, you can't do that. So if you come and see us a couple days early, we can go through the process of getting that certificate of eligibility so that you can confidently go shopping. And I think that's a thing not a lot of people think about, but it can really make your life a lot easier. So that would be the thing, I think.
All right, great. Well, Joe, as always, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. All right. Have a good one, folks.